Hello, friend. Can you imagine this? The man in front of you is the mastermind behind 108 horrific crimes. His name is Zhao Jincheng, and starting from 1965, in just a short 7 years, he committed 108 robberies, thefts, rapes, and murders across 3 northeastern provinces. His methods were extremely cruel and malicious. What frightens us the most is that in many of the murders he committed, he even desecrated the victims' bodies, and most of the victims were young girls. The oldest victim was only 15 years old, and the youngest was only 4 years old. When the case was revealed, the entire Northeast region was immediately plunged into a state of panic. People fell into a state of extreme anxiety and fear, especially families with daughters. They could not accept this truth. So why did Zhao Jincheng become so brutal? In the 1970s, in the Daibai and Dahe areas of Harbin, China, there were more than 10 cases of murders and rape of the dead bodies, and all the victims were young girls. These girls were attacked on their way to or from school or while playing in front of their homes. They were kidnapped by this man and taken to remote areas to be brutally murdered. They were then dismembered and stabbed to death. For a time, the stench of blood pervaded the entire city. The families of the victims were in immense grief. Families with daughters were even more worried and uneasy. Some parents took long leaves from work to escort their daughters to and from school. Some even imprisoned their daughters at home, not allowing them to go out. Others sent their daughters to stay with relatives in other areas for safety. In extreme cases, they sold their old homes at low prices and bought new homes in other areas at higher prices to ensure the safety of their children. Theoretically, with the crime occurring so frequently, the police should have taken notice over time. However, at that time, the country was going through a special period. Several reputable forensic experts were falsely accused and removed, being regarded as demons. The duties of the police, prosecutors, and courts were paralyzed. Power was in the hands of the Reform Committee and the Military Committee. Although the Military Committee was very concerned about the case and appointed someone to investigate it in detail, they lacked experience in investigations. As a result, despite the long-term investigation, there was no progress. It wasn't until a year later that the case began to see some small developments. On the afternoon of June 17, 1971, after reading at an elementary school in the Taiping district, a 10-year-old girl named Jin was walking home alone as usual. When she reached a deserted intersection, a grown man suddenly jumped out from behind, grabbing her by the neck. Jin was then dragged into the corner of that intersection. At that moment, the criminal took out a pre-prepared knife and stabbed her in the neck 7 times, killing her on the spot. More cruelly, after killing her, the criminal assaulted her. However, at that moment, 2 passers-by walked by the intersection, and the criminal, in panic, abandoned his bicycle and fled the scene. This case finally left some valuable evidence for the police. They not only obtained fingerprints from the victim's body, but also found 2 clear fingerprints on the abandoned bicycle. However, at that time, there was no fingerprint database to identify the suspect's identity. Thus, the police could not use the fingerprints to filter out suspects. Fingerprints could only be used after the police caught the criminal to prove their involvement in the case. Although they had some evidence, the police still needed to find other clues to solve the case. However, since the crime occurred in a dark area and the criminal reacted quickly, even passers-by couldn't realize what was happening. They couldn't see the criminal's appearance clearly before he disappeared, so the police had to investigate the surrounding area, hoping to find more clues. Unexpectedly, just half a year later, the horror repeated itself on a 5-year-old girl. On December 10th, 1971, a girl named Ma, living on Beizan Road, Taiping district, suddenly disappeared while playing right in front of her house. The family searched everywhere she might have gone but couldn't find any trace of her. Finally, they found her body in a pile of wood outside a lumber processing plant. Forensic examination results showed that she had been strangled to death. After she died, to satisfy his perverse desires, the criminal stabbed her in the neck, decapitated her, and assaulted her body. More cruelly, to evade his crimes, he mutilated her face. Many bite marks were left on her face. This was no longer a simple murder case. The criminal had become insane, brutal, bloodthirsty, and perverted. His targets were all underage girls, causing severe panic and societal impact. To quickly catch the culprit and provide a satisfactory explanation to the victims' families and reassure other families, the Military Management Committee established a special investigation team. Zhang Jintian, a former police officer, was appointed as the team leader. He was a capable and experienced individual. After being liberated, he participated in criminal investigations and had solved many major cases, apprehending numerous criminals. Therefore, the Military Management Committee entrusted him with this difficult task. Zhang Jintian did not disappoint. With his experience and capability, he began with the witnesses, investigating the process of the girl's assault and the suspect's characteristics. Through preliminary investigation, it was concluded that the suspect was a young man about 1.7 meters tall and might be living in the Taiping area. The next step was to identify the suspect. However, at that time, due to the lack of advanced modern equipment and undeveloped techniques, the investigation faced many difficulties. For such a serial murder case, the challenges were even greater. Lacking sufficient evidence, the investigation team chose to split their forces. They stationed personnel to guard potential crime scenes day and night, especially increasing manpower at night. Finally, their efforts paid off. After more than a month, the criminal finally reappeared. Around 5 p.m. that day, it was getting dark. A girl, about 10 years old, was walking home from school with her backpack. The police noticed a man staring at her as she passed Beikua Street. His appearance perfectly matched the witness descriptions, and his behavior was very suspicious. Whenever someone walked by, he became very uneasy. The investigation team members were almost certain this man was the suspect. Therefore, they immediately followed him, intending to catch him when he attacked the girl. However, just as he was about to make his move, the girl unexpectedly turned into a large house and was pulled inside by a woman. The investigation team felt relieved but also disappointed that they couldn't catch him in the act. They were in a dilemma. If they arrested him immediately, they lacked concrete evidence, but if they let him go, all their efforts would be in vain. After some deliberation, they decided it was better to arrest the wrong person than let the criminal go. So they took the man to the police station for questioning. His name was Zhao Jin Chung, 26 years old, living at 83 Haiyuan Street, Taiping District. Since Zhao Jin Cheng hadn't committed an attack, the police had no direct evidence of his crimes. However, Zhao Jin Cheng was cunning, firmly denying following the girl when questioned by the police and not mentioning any of the crimes he was involved in. Faced with such a stubborn criminal, the police increased the pressure during the interrogation while also sending another team to the local police station and his residence to gather more information. This investigation didn't take as long as the police had anticipated. Zhao Jin Chung had a criminal record. Even though he was only 26, he had already become a con artist and had been pursued and dealt with by the police several times for theft and fraud. The interview with Zhao Jin Chung lasted until early morning, but he still didn't confess. The police had to transfer him to a temporary correctional center and planned to continue the interrogation the next morning. However, no one could have anticipated that the next morning, when the police took Zhao Jin Chung to the dining hall for breakfast, he pretended to need the bathroom, then used an iron grate to bend the fence and escaped. This escape confirmed his criminal behavior. While the police launched an emergency manhunt, they also began collecting evidence related to Zhao Jin Chung. After sorting and categorizing the evidence from similar cases, the police discovered 3 useful pieces of evidence. First, in the case of the girl Jin, during the crime, Zhao Jin Chung was spotted by passers-by and in his panic abandoned his bicycle and fled. The police found Zhao Jin Cheng's fingerprints on this bicycle. Second, evidence collected from the victim's body. At present, this would be ironclad evidence. DNA would identify the criminal. Unfortunately, at that time, these physical evidence pieces could only test for blood, not DNA. The third piece of evidence was the bite marks on the face of the victim Ma, another clear trace left by Zhao Jin Chung. However, as conclusive evidence for a conviction, the identification methods at the time were not yet perfect, and it was uncertain whether the bite marks could be considered definitive proof of the crime. Despite these challenges, the City Reform Committee issued an arrest warrant for Zhao Jin Cheng and distributed it to district and county police agencies and smaller units. They conducted investigations at crowded places like train stations, docks, bus stops, major bus terminals, parks, cinemas, shopping centers, and many other locations to gather information. Additionally, the police sent personnel to monitor Zhao Jin Cheng's relatives and family. They also set up checkpoints at the entrances and exits of urban and rural areas. This time, the police were determined, casting a wide net to ensure he couldn't escape. In less than 2 months, Zhao Jin Cheng was captured. But things didn't go as planned. Zhao Jin Cheng wasn't arrested by the police, but he turned himself in. After escaping from the police station, Zhao Jin Cheng showed no remorse and continued his criminal activities, blatantly disregarding the police. On April 20th, 1972, near Park Elementary School, Zhao Jin Cheng encountered a woman about 30 years old. In broad daylight, he unzipped his pants to expose himself and deliberately harassed the woman. She screamed for help. At that moment, several passers-by heard her cries and came to her aid. 4 or 5 young men surrounded him, preventing him from escaping. Despite his attempts to flee, the young men caught him and took him to the police station. The police were astonished to see Zhao Jincheng, not expecting that the perverse criminal who had been on the run for over 3 years would be caught in such a situation. The police thought that this time he would confess and cooperate with the investigation, but to their surprise, he stubbornly refused to admit his crimes. The police interrogated him using various methods, but he remained defiant and did not confess. They had to rely on evidence to force him to admit his guilt. They collected fingerprints, blood samples, and bite marks from Zhao Jincheng and directly compared them with samples from the crime scenes. At the same time, the police deployed forces to search his home. Finally, they succeeded in gathering incriminating evidence against Zhao Jincheng. Investigators found a knife about half a foot long with a wooden handle under Zhao Jincheng's bed. Although the knife had been cleaned, dried bloodstains remained on the handle. Blood tests confirmed that the blood belonged to blood type AB, matching the victim, Ma's blood type. However, the police did not find Zhao Jincheng's fingerprints on the knife, so they still couldn't convict him based solely on this evidence. Regarding fingerprints after comparison, they confirmed that Zhao Jincheng's right thumbprint on the knife matched the fingerprints on the bicycle found at the crime scene. However, since the bicycle was not a direct tool of the crime, these fingerprints could not serve as direct evidence. Regarding blood evidence, although it was confirmed that Zhao Jincheng's blood type matched the blood type found through analysis on the victim's body, blood type is not unique, and thus it couldn't be used for direct conviction. In this situation, the investigators could only place their final hope on the bite marks. Based on the shape of the dental arch, the appearance of the teeth, the distance between the teeth, and their unique relationships, experts took a week to determine that the bite marks on the victim's face were formed by the upper and lower teeth of the suspect Zhao Jincheng. When the bite mark matching results were presented to Zhao Jincheng, his psychological defenses finally collapsed. Knowing he would be sentenced to death, he confessed to 108 crimes he had committed since 1967. Hoping to gain some recognition. According to his confession, he was born in 1946 into an ordinary family in Taipei, with both parents being factory workers who were busy with their jobs. Zhao Jincheng was neglected and lacked parental care, which left him deprived of love and family attention from an early age. He dropped out of high school and started working while still young. During his time working, he befriended many bad elements and frequently engaged in theft. In his teenage years, no one wanted to date him. So to deal with his unfulfilled sexual desires, he began stalking women in the area from 1965. Initially, he only harassed women and had been arrested by the police several times. However, Zhao Jincheng not only failed to reform, but became increasingly bold, gradually escalating from harassment to rape. Being of short stature, Zhao Jincheng was very afraid of encountering tall, strong women. Therefore, he chose weak and defenseless targets, namely young girls. After each attack, he used a knife to threaten the victims, preventing them from reporting to the police. However, in the final moments, the cruelty of Zhao Jincheng had changed. He was afraid that the victim would not keep the promise, and after being released, they could report to the police. Therefore, he ruthlessly killed the victim. According to the testimony of Zhao Jincheng, from 1967 to 1972, he was arrested, and in nearly 5 years, he had operated in 3 provinces in northeast China and had committed up to 108 cases of sexual assault, theft, rape, and murder. This number shocked everyone present at the time. People could not believe that Zhao Jincheng alone had committed such heinous acts. Using the phrase cruel to the extreme to describe him is not an exaggeration. However, due to the limited criminal investigation techniques of that time, the police were only able to confirm 38 cases with criminal evidence. Among them, there were 10 murder cases like the cases of Jin and Ma. On September 26, 1972, a public sentencing conference was held at a crowded square in Harbin, and he was sentenced to death for the crimes of murder and rape. When the sound of the gunshot rang out, Zhao Jincheng's life of crime had ended, and the series of murder and rape cases that had shocked northeast China had finally come to an end. Although he was sentenced to death, the pain and trauma suffered by the families of the victims and the lingering fears of the local people may never fully subside. A truly heartbreaking case, but it has left us with many lessons that we need to reflect on. If his parents had cared for him more and educated him better, how would it have turned out? If he had been better protected and supervised, would he have fallen in with bad friends and been corrupted? And there are many other what-if questions. Therefore, educating one's children is of utmost importance. We must not let the if-only and what-if scenarios happen. As the saying goes, teach the child from an early age, teach the wife from when she first comes home. This is truly meaningful.